Hello, I hope you are all doing well. This is the first of my new style of wrap-up videos. I decided this year that I wasn't going to do month-by-month wrap-ups, as I found that was giving myself too much pressure to read a certain amount of books each month, so I am kind of copying Erica from Erica Reads Books style of wrap-ups, only she does 5 books per video. I'm just going to do 4 books, mainly because I'm very lazy and I hate editing long videos. Though I'm not quite following that rule in this video because I'm going to talk about a series as a whole, so I'm just going to count that as one book. So over the Christmas and New Year's break, I read the Hunger Games series. So technically the first book, The Hunger Games, was the last book I read in 2019, and then I read the other 2 in the series, Catching Fire and Mockingjay, in the first week of 2020. I decided to read these on a whim because my parents own all 3 books. For some reason they went through a bit of a Hunger Games craze a couple of years ago, and they decided to watch all the films and then wanted to read all the books as well. My parents got the books from op shops, and I was very insistent that mum get them from the same series, so they have quite a nice set of the books in the black covers. I'd only read these books once before. I think I read all 3 of them at the same time the last book came out. I remember getting them from my school library. I think it must have been in year 11, and just completely devouring them practically in one sitting. And I basically did the same with my reread. I think I read the last one in a couple of days, which is very easy when you're on Christmas break, obviously. I didn't remember every single twist and plot point going in, but as I was reading along, I kind of was remembering stuff before it actually happened. But even knowing the stories, I still found them so engaging. What I really noticed this time round is that really what the books are about is the media and manipulation of the media. I love that Katniss is not some kind of chosen one. She is a hero completely by accident, but then also not by accident because she is a genuinely selfless person. And the way that both the Capitol and the rebels manipulate this for their own gain is a really clever way for Suzanne Collins to basically just teach teenagers reading these books about how the media manipulates everything for their own gain and not to believe anything at face value. This focus on PR just feels like the most accurate depiction of what a dystopian future really would be like. I mean, just look at the recent toilet paper buying craze that we've experienced in Australia. There was no authorities telling anyone that they should be mass buying toilet paper. Someone did it and talked about it on social media, and suddenly everyone's doing it. And I think Suzanne Collins hit the nail on the head 10 years ago and wrote a story that honestly seems more relevant now than it even did back then. These books are also just really fun to read. Katniss is a great character. All the characters great, in fact. Katniss herself is genuinely so funny so much of the time in this kind of accidental way. I think the way Suzanne Collins writes her voice is really clever. I was always Team Peter personally. I mean, why would you not choose a guy who's gonna bake you bread all the time? That just seems like a no-brainer to me. So yeah, The Hunger Games. It's a series that holds up and is well worth reading again, or for the first time if you did not read them when the Hunger Games craze came out. I actually forgot about the fact that a new Hunger Games prequel is being released this year, so that was coincidental good timing, and I was not at all interested in reading that book, but now I am actually kind of curious. So I decided to pick up Pride and Prejudice next because I wanted to read Emma before the new film adaptation came out, and I was going through Jane Austen's works in the order in which she wrote them. For some reason I had it in my head that Emma came after Pride and Prejudice, but I realized after I finished reading it that it's actually Mansfield Park that comes next, so I've totally stopped that up. But anyway, I wouldn't have had time to read Mansfield Park before the film of Emma came out, so I'm just gonna have to not worry about that and read Mansfield Park next. Anyway, I read Pride and Prejudice, and I'm so glad I did because I think I enjoyed this more than I did the first time I read it. This story for me is so wound up with the 1995 BBC adaptation because that's something that I've watched since I was literally 2 years old when it came out. So the story to me is that TV show, and I've only read the book once before, and it's kind of weird reading a story I'm so familiar with but I'm not familiar with the actual text of the book. So I think the first time I read it I was just a little bit too caught up in that, but I feel like this time I was able to appreciate it as its own thing. For the first time reading this and reading all of Jane Austen's works, I'm actually older than all of the protagonists. So what really struck me is how young everyone is and how well Jane Austen represents their youth in this book. Elizabeth's failings of Prejudice and the way she is so easily deceived by Mr. Wickham's story is entirely down to the fact that she's only 20 and she'd not really left the house that she'd grown up in and had really not seen much of the world, especially when you're like one of the top families in this area. So in a way, this entire book is Elizabeth Bennet being challenged for the first time intellectually by people who don't automatically put her up on a pedestal like her father does. I think I actually liked Elizabeth's character much better in the book compared to the TV show as well. I feel like she is a much more active character in this story than she is presented in the adaptation, especially in the section when she's staying at Netherfield and she's really instigating a lot of the conversation with Mr. Darcy, even though she professes that she does not like him very much. It's so easy to see why this is considered one of the greatest works in the English language. It's also such a pacey book. So much happens, there's so many different characters. Elizabeth and Darcy's conversations are definitely the best part of the book for me. The tension between them is just so well drawn. I really noticed that most of the dialogue in the TV show is literally taken straight from the book, which just goes to show how clever Jane Austen is, that really barely any dialogue was needed to be added. The only thing I would say is that Jane Austen has a habit of letting her most dislikable characters ramble on for pages. You can tell she's having a great time writing the dialogue for these very stupid people, specifically Mr. Collins in this book, but it's not exactly fun to read when you just want to get back to Lizzie and Darcy. But apart from that, this was just such a good time and I can totally see why this is most people's favourite Jane Austen book. So next I read Emma, and my memory from when I last read Jane Austen's books was that I really enjoyed this one, and I definitely still think that Emma is my favourite Jane Austen character. I think she's her most nuanced character in that she really is dislikable in so many ways, but you still cannot help but root for her. Her unflattering traits like her snobbery don't come out of anything malicious. She has genuinely been taught that in the class system that she lives in, she is better than other people and that she should not deign to talk to people like Robert Martin the farmer. She just thinks that that's the way the world works and sees no reason to change it at all. Well, I think the book is a little bit too long. Again, a lot of the dislikable characters get really long pages of dialogue, but this length does really help in making Emma's sort of transformation from who she is at the beginning of the book to who she is at the end really quite believable. You really do get that slow change in her as she realizes that some of her behaviors have been not nice at all and that she is truly horrified that she may have hurt people around her because of the way she behaves. Emma's sort of known for being a really funny book as well, but honestly I think all of Jane Austen's books are really funny. Maybe Sense and Sensibility aside, that one I found quite dry. But the rest of them so far have all been funny, so for me that wasn't necessarily a standout of this book. That was just part and parcel of reading something by Jane Austen. The film adaptation, by the way, was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't so sure about it at first, I think because I didn't like the guy playing Mr. Elton. He was going full comical, whereas I find the character of Mr. Elton should be a little bit scary in that proposal scene when they're in the carriage and you really feel Emma's vulnerability at that moment because she's alone with a strange man who is getting extremely angry because he's being friend-zoned in that moment. And that's a really frightening scene that I think any woman can probably relate to. So yeah, once Mr. Elton's kind of gone off and got married, I found the film really picked up for me and I absolutely loved the two people playing Emma and Mr. Knightley, and I think Mr. Knightley's character especially was the best version I've seen of him. I find him quite a boring character, to be honest. In the book, he just comes along and gives a bit of a sermon to Emma, and I honestly found him kind of annoying. But this Mr. Knightley manages to do that while also maintaining his humour and also being a very human character. Like, you get to see his emotions as well. There's one particular dance scene that is incredible, and also the proposal scene I absolutely loved. So yeah, I would recommend checking out the film of Emma as well if you love the book. So the last book I'm going to mention today is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. I read this book because I'm writing an article for work along with one of my colleagues. She's listening to the audiobook of this novel, so she's going to write about the experience of listening to the audiobook, whereas I'm going to write about the experience of reading the physical book. Not entirely sure what I'm going to say, really. It was mainly her idea. I'm just kind of going along with it because she's my manager. But look, it should be a fun exercise, and we chose this book because I guess because it was both one that we were interested in reading and also because the film is coming out in May, and so this article is going to go out in a magazine at the same time, so it all links together very well, which is what we like in the journalism world. So yeah, I did actually try reading this book I think a couple of years ago and was not really into it, so I DNF'd it. So going into this, I was a little bit apprehensive that I would have to push my way through it, but I actually did find myself getting into it a bit more. I entirely guessed all the twists. They were so obvious to me, and that's not a good thing because I'm someone who does not go out of my way to guess twists at all. I like to just sit back and have the story told to me without any work on my behalf. So that was kind of disappointing because reading a thriller book like that, you kind of want to be shocked and surprised. I think my main problem with the book was that I was not interested in the character of Anna, and she's the person that we spend the entire book with. I didn't mind her so much this time round, even though I do think her character is kind of cliche, and I am a little bit sick of these dysfunctional female characters who have to be alcoholics. You can be dysfunctional without alcohol. I also found the constant reference to black and white noir films kind of tedious. They weren't really naturally inserted into the book. They very much felt like the author was just showing off about how much they know about old movies. And when you're already so obviously taking elements from those old films, the whole looking out the window thing and seeing a crime is very much just Rear Window, the film by Alfred Hitchcock. So I think you should either do one or the other. You should have your plot points be referencing the films, or you can reference the films in the plot but have your plot be a bit more original. I think having both in there was a little bit too much. I do understand that Anna's obsession with those films does help add to her character in that it makes it more believable that she might have imagined the thing that she thinks she saw. I'll be really interested to see the film when it comes out to see if they change anything and maybe make the plot a bit tighter and sort of make the twists a little bit less obvious. So that's all the books I have to talk about today. If you've read any of those books, let me know in the comments and let me know what you thought about them as well. Before I go, I just want to say a big thank you to Katie from Books and Things for shouting me out in one of her latest videos talking about small booktubers. I was below 500 subscribers and now I am well above that, and I just want to say thank you to anyone who subscribed. I was going to do some kind of special video to celebrate reaching 500, but I sort of thought I wouldn't get there for some time, so the fact that I'm suddenly well above that has taken me by surprise. So I'll have to work out pretty soon what kind of video I want to do for that. If you have any suggestions, let me know. I hope you have a great day and I will see you soon. Bye!